Discover the incredible journey of a female CEO who transformed from a hated concubine to freedom. Jessica Thompson clenched her fist, the crumpled paper clinging to her palm like the judgment of a town that never truly believed in her. The whispers followed her, thinly veiled ridicule in the small town of Willow Creek, where she once wore the badge of a hated concubine. She had fought so hard to reclaim her identity, shedding layers of a turbulent past, and yet here she was, at the threshold of her first class at the local community college, with the echoes of condescension ringing in her ears. Just moments before, as her heart raced, she could hear the laughter of classmates who were blissfully unaware of the depths of her struggle. Jessica took a deep breath and stepped into the classroom, her eyes scanning the faces of her peers hardened by judgment, softened by inexperience. They didn't see her potential, they only saw the chaos that had followed her into adulthood. But she wasn't here to be defined by those shadows. Fueled by love and guidance from her grandmother, who had always believed in resilience, Jessica resolved to rewrite her story. Yet every time she thought about finding her voice in discussions, dread crept in, tightening her chest. Late nights and early mornings became her companions as she dove into studies, grasping onto the welcome distraction that academia provided. Taking business courses revealed a flicker of passion inside her. But the flicker was often accompanied by anguish. She wrestled with self-doubt, grappling with the fear that her past would always pull her back. What if her classmates saw through her efforts? What if she failed to seize this long-awaited opportunity? Anxiety clawed at her mind. She often stopped to question if she could withstand the pressure that came from her past colliding with her ambitions. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue, but just when she thought she could emerge from the depths, a chilling reminder of her reality loomed in the form of her former employer, a ruthless corporation that had exploited her vulnerability, weakening her with every interaction. They were a shadow stretching across her aspirations, threatening her newfound momentum. Jessica's heart raced at the thought, her palms sweating as she recalled their callousness. Would they come for her again? The haunting query loomed larger as each day passed. Then, fate intervened. Stumbling onto an old box in her grandmother's attic, she uncovered documents that illuminated secrets buried deep in her family's past. It was a legacy intertwined with strength, resilience, and raw determination. Each piece whispered of her true identity, challenging every preconception that had ever stifled her. The remnants of her family's fight sent an electrifying surge through Jessica. But with every revelation came fear. Could she harness this legacy to secure her freedom? As she stood on the precipice of a new beginning, shadows danced around her once again, tightening their grip. The lines between who she was and who she aspired to be blurred into an insurmountable maze. Could she unleash the leader within and defy the chains of her past? Or would doubt drag her back into obscurity? Jessica leaned into her burgeoning resolve, her heart battling the tremors of uncertainty. The days of gentle whispers transformed into a cacophony of disapproval, leaving her suspended in a storm of emotion, teetering on the edge of transformation. The question remained sharp and painful. Could her plight ignite a flame of change, or would it only stoke the fire of contempt? With each passing day, Jessica's resolve solidified like steel being forged in the fire of her experiences. The contents of that forgotten box lingered in her mind, not just as remnants of a past life, but as a roadmap guiding her toward a future she had long deemed unattainable. She became consumed by an insatiable urge to unravel the legacy her family had built and to transform its wisdom into actionable strength. The classroom dynamics soon shifted for her. She no longer felt like an outsider, where laughter echoed with mockery. Rather, each accounting assignment and group project presented an opportunity to reclaim her voice. She began to participate more actively, pushing past her anxiety one small victory at a time. During one particularly grueling project, Jessica found herself in a group with two classmates who had previously ostracized her. The heat of their past judgments simmered in the air. "This is a waste of time, we have real work to do," one of them sneered. A familiar wave of self-doubt flooded her being, yet something more profound stirred within her. She had unearthed the echoes of resilience in her family's history, and this was her moment to confront her adversaries head-on. "Actually, I believe this project will expose us to real business scenarios," she stated, voice firm despite the tremor beneath. For the first time, she grasped the notion that her past experiences, though painful, were not mere shackles. They had shaped her that day into a person capable of standing up. The two classmates exchanged surprised glances, perhaps questioning the ease with which they had dismissed her. Despite that moment of triumph, doubt still lingered like a specter. Would that ephemeral spark translate into anything more than fleeting courage? Jessica spent hours at home sifting through the documents she had unearthed, contemplating what routes they opened for her. They were not just words on paper, but a glowing legacy. She discovered that her grandmother had been a small business owner in her early years, facing societal scorn similar to what Jessica endured. Her enterprise, a modest apparel shop, thrived against all odds. This revelation awakened something primal within Jessica. Maybe the chains binding her to her past were her greatest asset. It was time for her to create, to innovate, inspired by the tenacity woven through her lineage. Motivated by both fear and excitement, she decided to act on this revelation. Quiet determination brought thoughts to fruition as she crafted a business plan, one tailored to showcase the artistry of local artisans, a product of the very community that had once turned against her. It wasn't just a dream, it was a tangible path she could take, a chance to manifest a legacy of her own. With each draft, her confidence escalated, yet alongside it rose an undeniable anxiety. What if her efforts were met with ridicule? What if that former employer, the corporation that had once crushed her spirit, rose to challenge her ambitions again? In a moment of clarity, amid frantic reorganizing of her extensive notes, she had a realization. The risk was an essential ingredient for growth, the fear of failure only serving as a spotlight illuminating the path to success. Suddenly, it didn't matter if she stumbled. What mattered was the journey of daring to rise. As the weeks progressed, Jessica felt the transformation taking root like wildflowers in a cracked sidewalk. But the looming presence of her former employer persisted, and she knew she could no longer avoid it. The moment had come to face the corporation that had once threatened her existence. Fueled by the insight of her family's resilience, she prepared for the confrontation that awaited her on the horizon. Would this face-off reveal the depths of her turmoil, or uncover the strength she possessed? When the time came, would she cower in the shadows, or stand in her light, ready to redefine her future? The evening air was heavy with anticipation as Jessica approached the towering glass facade of the corporation that had once cast a shadow over her ambitions. The familiar logo standing boldly at the entrance felt like a mocking reminder of her past, a sharp contrast to the fledgling confidence she had nurtured over recent months. It was as if the building itself held her in judgment. Each step towards the entrance echoed with the urgency of her thoughts. What if they laughed at her proposals? What if they dismissed her once again? The questions buzzed relentlessly in her mind, but she had resolved not to allow fear to dictate her actions any longer. With every breath she took, she channeled her grandmother's determination, the memories of her grandmother's struggles a faint chorus urging her forward. This was not merely about standing up to her former employers, it was an assertion of her identity, a rejection of the self-doubt that had plagued her. Upon stepping into the sterile lobby, Jessica instinctively straightened her back. The polished floors reflected not just the lights overhead, but also pieces of something much deeper. Her growth. She checked in with the receptionist, who hardly looked up from her screen. Jessica felt invisible for a moment, but she quickly reminded herself of the strength she had cultivated, each draft of her business plan clearly defining not just her vision, but her worth. Soon her name was called, and she was escorted to a conference room filled with an air of disinterest, the executive seated at the table glancing through documents without a hint of acknowledgement. Jessica paused for a fraction of a second, letting the palpable energy of her anticipation coalesce into something concrete. This was her moment to showcase her newfound vision, to engage with those who had once belittled her. With a deep breath, she began. "Thank you for seeing me today. I'm excited to present a proposal that honors local artistry and entrepreneurship." The words felt charged with a resonance she had not anticipated. Each syllable served as a reminder that she was no longer the quiet girl who faded into the background. As she delved into her presentation, sharing ideas that encapsulated the essence of community and artistry, she felt the energy in the room shift. What was once disinterested became curious, and as she spoke, she noticed the subtle nods of understanding from the executives, surprisingly engaged. Each validating gesture stoked the embers of her courage, making each point feel both necessary and empowering. Yet, just as momentum built, she could sense an underlying tension, the looming skepticism of the very corporation that had tried to suppress her previously. It came from the head of the table, a man whose unruly gray hair matched his dismissive demeanor. "There are gaps in your understanding of market positioning here. How do you plan to overcome competition at this level?" His words landed like a bucket of cold water, and the room went still. Jessica's mind raced, panic threatening to choke the voice she had built. The instinct to retreat crept in, yet she reminded herself that her grandmother had faced far worse. With renewed clarity, she looked directly at him. "Competition drives innovation," she countered, deliberating her words. "My proposal focuses on community engagement, which I believe adds immeasurable value." The dialogue continued, her confidence rising as she parried each question. But lurking beneath was the fear of reverting to the quiet girl once undone by similar confrontations. Would the echo of that fear hinder her from standing her ground? As the meeting came to an end, Jessica sensed more than just their critique. She could feel the tide turning. With a firm handshake and a poised smile, she left the conference room, her heart racing not in fear, but in exhilaration. But even in her triumph, she understood that this confrontation was not an end, it was but the beginning of countless others. The hazy outline of her future still loomed uncertain, marked with promises and threats. Would she solidify her place in the business realm, or would past shadows claw their way back to overshadow her progress? As she stepped out into the city, Jessica understood the journey was far from over. The stakes had only increased. In the coming days, she would have to consolidate this momentum and plan for the next strategic challenges. Would she be ready when her past resurfaced in unexpected ways? With the city skyline looming in the distance, Jessica's heart was still racing from the adrenaline of the meeting. She stepped into the bustling streets, yet felt as though she was moving in a different sphere from the crowd around her. Each pedestrian with their hurried pace reminded her just how much she'd changed. She was no longer just another face in the crowd. She was a woman on a mission. Returning home, Jessica's mind churned with possibilities. The speech felt invigorating, but the questions posed by that gray-haired executive lingered. He had a point, her plan had gaps. The business landscape was littered with competitors, each more established and connected. She could not afford to let their skepticism linger. Her credibility hinged on proving she was more than just a fleeting idea in a boardroom. That night, Jessica pulled up her laptop, and a flicker of doubt ignited within her as she stared at her proposal on the screen. It was a fine tapestry of her ambitions, woven with idealism and passion. But would it stand the scrutiny of the market? A few weeks ago, she had been filled with optimism. Now there was a creeping tension. As her fingers hovered over the keyboard, she resisted the urge to succumb to doubt. Instead, she began to dissect every section of her proposal. What aspects could use more defense? She scrutinized every argument and inch of the market analysis, aware that granularity could also prove her grounded understanding. Jessica's inner voice surged, her grandmother's spirit guiding her. Fortitude is built through adversity. The next day, she reached out to some trusted friends who were industry experts. She needed their insights, which meant exposing her vulnerabilities. Jessica felt a flutter of anxiety, revealing her proposal to new eyes. Each critique could feel like a dismantling of her vision. However, she resolved that feedback was her ally, not her enemy. Gathering her courage, she scheduled a call with Elijah, a former colleague turned consultant who often offered sensible advice. As they spoke, her fears began to dissipate. His perspective enriched her thinking. "Jessica, your proposal is on the right track," he said. "But think about how you can differentiate your concept from the market giants. You need a unique angle that speaks directly to your target demographic." His words hung in the air like anchors. She had envisioned artistry and community engagement, but what was the emotional hook? She brainstormed ideas. What if she could forge partnerships with local artisans who could showcase their work through her model? How could she make the people feel part of a narrative that was not only about buying a product but about belonging? The revelations poured forth, invigorating her once more. It wasn't merely about selling, it was about storytelling. The challenge ahead demanded this deeper understanding, and she felt herself rallying around her strengths once again. As days turned into nights, Jessica immersed herself in deep research, market trends, and emotional narratives, weaving a more intricate web of strategy for her proposal. She embraced networking events and small community mixers, where she could connect with artisans, gaining first-hand insight into their experiences and stories. Each interaction chipped away at her proverbial fears, unveiling hidden capabilities she never knew she possessed. But underlying her triumphs was still the specter of doubt, the possibility that her journey to carve a place in the world of business would stumble at the hands of old nemesis. Would her past weaknesses resurface to haunt her when the stakes were highest? As she sat late one night, surrounded by papers and ideas, Jessica felt a unique fusion of excitement and uncertainty. She was no longer the girl they once disregarded. She was forging her identity anew. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, but one question pulled at her consciousness like an insistent whisper. Who were her true allies in this new chapter? This was her moment, preparing for the next pitch, a pivotal opportunity that could either solidify her growth or expose her fears. The feeling of stepping into the arena again left her breathless, but this time, she welcomed it. Would she wield the full strength of her newfound convictions when the moment finally arrived? Jessica woke to an overcast sky, the weight of the looming presentation pressing heavily on her chest. The previous evening's revelations had sparked a fire within her, yet a nagging voice questioned her readiness. As she brewed coffee, the aroma filled her small kitchen, yet did little to stave off the anxiety swirling in her mind. Each sip tasted like a bitter reminder of the stakes involved. Success was inching closer, yet so was the possibility of failure. Perched at her dining table, papers spread out like battle plans, she examined the intricate tapestry of her revised proposal. The partnerships with local artisans had breathed new life into her business model, yet doubts crept in. Was she truly ready to present this to seasoned professionals? Her heart raced. After months of effort, this was the moment that could crystallize her hard work into tangible success, or further fracture her fragile confidence. She began rehearsing her pitch in front of the mirror, watching her own reflection as she spoke aloud. The words flowed with increasing enthusiasm, though every time she swapped her verbal trail for a silent thought, insecurity gnawed at her. Could she maintain the momentum? Would her ideas resonate, or would they falter in the face of ruthless pragmatism? After several iterations, she finally locked in the structure of her presentation: begin with a problem, highlight her solution, and evoke the emotional pull by weaving the artisan stories into the narrative. This final element emerged as her secret weapon, a relatable thread to connect with the audience. But which artisans would she feature? Their success stories could turn mere ideas into a relatable vision. Jessica sent a flurry of messages, reaching out to the artisans she had met in recent days. The warmth in their exchanges lifted her spirits. Each response echoed with enthusiasm, affirming that they believed in her vision just as she believed in theirs. It was as if they were teaming up for a common cause, their individual talents intertwined to form a more robust narrative. The morning grew brighter, illuminating her determination. Yet, Soon the hardest battle began, the mental one. As the clock ticked closer to her presentation, seeds of doubt resurfaced, whispering fears about her inexperience and past failures. Yet amidst the haze of anxiety, a spark of self-awareness ignited. She was not who she used to be. She had weathered storms that had once knocked her down. With every deep breath, she anchored herself in the knowledge she had gained. She was no longer an outsider looking in. She was the architect of her own destiny. Each critique she had faced forged resilience in her. Each connection built trust. She silently recited a mantra, reminding herself that progress was not about perfection, but about perseverance. When the time finally arrived, Jessica stood in front of a large conference room filled with eyes that scrutinized her every move. The room pulsed with tension. She could feel the weight of every judgment. Yet, instead of retreating into herself, she walked into the spotlight, her determination solidifying into focus. As she began to speak, her passion ignited the words, and she let the heart of her proposal spill forth, rich with stories and hopes. Midway through, she felt a shift in the energy of the room. Attentive faces leaned forward. They were listening not just to her business model, but to the dream she was painting. The emotional connection transformed the narrative from a mere proposal into a living entity, alive with the spirit of potential. But just as she began to sense that something significant was unfolding, the unsettling voice of the gray-haired executive pierced through her moment. It derailed her rhythm with a probing question that bore into her vulnerabilities. Long before she could respond, a mix of determination and dread tightened in her chest. Was this truly the moment she had envisioned, or had she opened a door to an unknown conflict? In that instant, Jessica stood at a crossroads, both uncertain yet assured. Was she ready for what awaited her on the other side? Jessica paused, momentarily frozen by the sharpness of the executive's inquiry. His piercing gaze bore into her, questioning not just her data, but the very foundation of her ambition. An uncomfortable silence enveloped the room, punctuated by the low hum of overhead lights. No longer just the architect of her pitch, she now faced the specter of doubt that had shadowed her for far too long. As she took a slow, deliberate breath, the anxiety that had threatened to consume her transformed into something more manageable. This was not merely about the business proposal, it was about standing firm in her beliefs, about advocating for the artisans she had grown to respect and champion. In that moment, she rewrote her internal narrative. She wasn't merely defending her work, she was defending a vision that could uplift others. That's a valid point, Jessica replied, her voice steady despite the quickened pace of her heart. However, I believe the strength of our model lies in its acceptance of vulnerability, ours, and those we uplift. The artisan stories are realities that speak to resilience and creativity, attributes that are essential in today's market. She sensed a shift of palpable change among her audience. The initial skepticism began to melt away as she navigated through her proposal, addressing not only the pragmatic aspects but underscoring the emotional and ethical importance of her work. Each response to the probing questions transformed her fear into urgency, breaking through the barriers of self-doubt she had meticulously constructed. Encouraged, she wove the narratives of specific artisans into her delivery, each tale a testament to human persistence. She recalled the potter, whose intricate designs had been the product of generations of failing and learning, culminating in a craft that resonated with buyers on an emotional level. The once intimidating executive now took notes, his stern expression softening ever so slightly. As she built this bridge between her proposal and real-world impact, she felt the warm emergence of clarity. Jessica was not just presenting a proposal, she was inviting them to share in a journey, a co-creation of future possibilities and partnership. The more animated she became, the more engaged they appeared. It was a dance of authenticity. She had learned how to invite her audience into her narrative. By the conclusion of her presentation, she was no longer just presenting facts and figures. Jessica had shared her own transformation, one that mirrored the artisan's struggles and triumphs. As the energy in the room peaked, she sensed acceptance budding beneath the surface. Perhaps they were beginning to envision their roles within her vision, contributing to a collective future marked by passion and authenticity. Even as she completed her pitch, however, doubts whispered anew: had she gone far enough? Would they see the businesses for their transformative potential, or would her work remain unseen, overshadowed by skepticism? Before she could dwell on it, applause erupted, jolting her from introspection. The appreciative faces reflected a mix of surprise and intrigue. Encouraged, Jessica allowed herself a flicker of hope, but the arrival of post-presentation questioning loomed ahead. Would they truly buy into this vision, or would it merely be another fleeting moment of connection? As she stepped down from the podium, the gray-haired executive raised his hand for the first question. The tension returned, but this time, a shift in her posture suggested resilience. A fire had ignited within her. The time had come to face not just their doubts, but her own, she thought as she steadied herself, ready to confront the obstacles that lay ahead. Would she emerge from this meeting with the support she yearned for, or would the metaphorical door that had just opened lead her into more unseen challenges? Jessica felt the weight of the room shift as she awaited the first question. The atmosphere had transformed from mere skepticism to a palpable curiosity, but doubt still flickered in the corners of her mind. It was one thing to present with conviction. It was another to dismantle the structural barriers of bias and judgment she'd always faced. The executive's voice cut through her thoughts. Your focus on vulnerability is intriguing, but can a business model built on that really sustain itself? What proof do you have that this methodology will yield returns? His words hung heavy, a challenge implicating not just her proposal, but her ability to persist in the corporate landscape, which often prioritized cold calculations over narratives born of human experience. She met his gaze, striving for clarity in her thoughts amid the brewing storm of opposition. I appreciate your concern, she replied, her voice unwavering. However, I can cite recent success stories where brands integrating emotional resonance into their strategies saw significant growth. My vision is predicated on weaving the artisan stories into the fabric of the brand. Authenticity can drive loyalty and sales in ways that traditional models often overlook. She recalled market studies and success metrics in those moments, piecing together statistics that had once felt overwhelming. The realization dawned. She had the knowledge, the statistics validated her vision, and it was time to own that expertise fully. It was an uncharted territory where emotion met business, a path she had crafted herself. As the inquiries continued, the next executive asking about market saturation and her ideal pricing strategy, Jessica leaned back slightly, recalibrating her approach. Gone were the days of seeking approval for her ideas. Now was the moment to assert her authority. They needed to see that her breadth of knowledge equaled her passion. Each interaction with the audience became a calculated move in her mental chess game, with each piece played showcasing her ability to adapt under scrutiny. Their questions lacked the sharpness of previous inquiries, now instead tinged with a curiosity akin to onlookers fascinated by a newly blossoming flower. With every articulated response, she felt herself growing, not just as a presenter, but as a leader. Her steadiness against their probing illuminated an undeniable truth. She was more than a vessel for someone else's dreams. She was an advocate forging a pathway to the future not just for herself, but for those whose stories had once been buried beneath corporate indifference. Alejandro, her right-hand colleague, leaned in toward Jessica as the meeting began to wind down. Whatever happens, you've already achieved something monumental, he whispered, giving her a firm nudge of support. But Jessica's mind raced further, debating whether this moment represented an authentic victory or another fleeting encounter with the limits imposed upon her. Had she succeeded in dismantling the stereotypes or merely nudged them aside? As the meeting came to an end, she sensed a hesitant flicker of openness as the executives exchanged glances, perhaps contemplating aligning with her vision. Yet, doubt still lingered. Would acceptance blossom? Or would she be left clutching the remnants of their skepticism like a tether binding her ambitions? The executive stood, thanking her for her detailed explanations, and Jessica felt a swell of determination mixed with an undercurrent of fear. She had held her ground, But how long could she maintain that stance when confronted with the relentless realities of a competitive market? As they filed out, she caught wind of a discussion amongst the executives, their voices low but the tension unmistakable. "This approach may warrant further consideration," one said, and Jessica's heart raced as a wave of hope surged within her. But it was the gray-haired executive's parting words that seized her attention, a fleeting declaration wrapped in ambiguity. "We'll see if this newfound vision can withstand the pressure of reality." His insinuation stung, igniting a fire within her. Was this a battle she could win, or merely one of many obstacles awaiting her? Jessica turned to gaze out the window, watching as the city thrummed with life, illustrating the urgency of her own path. The stakes were rising, and with them came an undeniable resolve. Her professional development hinged not only on this presentation as outcome, but on the determination to navigate the unseen challenges ahead. Could she fortify her convictions against impending scrutiny, or would the very foundations she had constructed come crashing down? The thoughts spiraled as she prepared for the formal follow-up. For the first time, dread twisted into excitement, every moment held within it the potential for growth. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that her greatest hurdles loomed just beyond the horizon. Steeling herself, Jessica realized that this was only the beginning. What awaited her and her next steps would carve the pathway for her future, but clarity would demand deep introspection and, perhaps, sacrifice. As the realization settled in, she wondered, was she truly ready to embrace the full weight of her ambition? In the days following the meeting, Jessica immersed herself in a whirlwind of activity, fueled by the tentative spark ignited within the executive team's response. Though uncertainty shadowed her thoughts, she channeled that energy into refining her proposal. Late nights became her sanctuary, and the dim glow of her laptop screen was the backdrop to her relentless pursuit of clarity. Each day began with a ritual. She would stand before her mirror, studying her breathing as she rehearsed her pitches. "I am not just a negotiator. I am a visionary," she would affirm, determined to internalize that belief. The repetitive act became a grounding exercise in assertion of her identity in the face of the systemic barriers that often undermined her credibility. Yet self-doubt lurked, particularly during those quiet moments when her mind wandered. What if the executives ultimately dismissed her ideas as impractical? The weight of that potential rejection loomed heavily, an ever-present specter whispering that ambition could lead only to failure. Each thought elicited a moment of pause, a reminder that doubt was often the greatest adversary she faced. She reached out to mentors who had successfully navigated similar hurdles, seeking their insights. One evening, sitting across from Clara, a seasoned entrepreneur, Jessica confessed her fears. "What if I'm setting myself up for disappointment?" she asked, vulnerability spilling forth. Clara's gaze was steady, reflecting years of battle-hardened wisdom. "You must confront that fear directly," Clara advised. "Embrace it as part of your journey. Every leader faces rejection. It's how you adapt that defines your path forward." The sagacity embedded in those words struck a chord within Jessica. It was a call to arms to confront the fears that lingered at the periphery rather than allowing them to fester in silence. Incorporating Clara's perspective into her development plan, Jessica reevaluated her approach. She analyzed competitor strategies, dissecting their successes and setbacks, extracting lessons that seemed both universal and unique to their circumstances. The very act of analysis empowered her, revealing not just gaps in her own strategy, but sparking innovative ideas that made her proposal feel vibrant, alive. As she meticulously prepared for the follow-up meeting, she envisioned the executives' faces, each of them embodying a challenge. She could almost hear the skepticism in their voices, feel the weight of their gazes, and with each mental rehearsal, her conviction grew. She would return not just with answers, but a compelling narrative layered with depth, a story they could not ignore. When the follow-up day arrived, the air in the conference room was thick with expectation. As Jessica took her place before the panel, she sensed a palpable shift in the atmosphere. She began to present her refined proposal, weaving in the research she had gathered and showcasing case studies of emotional resonance that showcased profits alongside emotional impact. The executives listened more intently this time, their expressions shifting from mere curiosity to engagement. It was a subtle, yet significant transformation that compelled her to lean into her narrative, further clarifying not just the statistics, but the deeper emotional threads that connected their potential consumers to the artisan stories she honored. At the meeting's close, an executive posed a question that cut deeper than before, unfurling layers of her resolve. What happens if the market doesn't respond as you anticipate? Are you prepared to pivot? Jessica hesitated briefly, but then crafted her response. Adaptation lives at the heart of my vision. It's not about rigid adherence to one structure, but flexibility. Just as the artisans evolve their crafts, I will evolve this model, capturing insights and feedback along the way. That moment crystallized a pivotal realization. She was no longer just defending her ideas. She was positioning herself as a leader capable of transformation. After the meeting, whispers of endorsement threaded through the room, and she inhaled deeply, tapping into optimism. Yet, as she stepped away, a new thought tugged at her mind. Could she truly remain adaptable while fiercely holding onto her vision? Had she really softened the hardened walls of doubt, or was the real test yet to come? With fresh resolve, she faced her next challenge, navigating the ensuing negotiations and fine-tuning her strategy while remaining true to her dream. As she left the conference room, her heart raced with both trepidation and anticipation. The stakes had escalated, and waiting for her was a realization poised to redefine everything she thought she knew about leadership and ambition. Would she rise to meet the next obstacle, or would the pressure force her to constrict the very vision she sought to expand? Jessica took a deep breath as she stepped out of the conference room, her heart pounding with the weight of possibility. The lingering echoes of the executives' discussions faded into the background, leaving her with a newfound determination, tinged with a hint of hesitation. How would she turn those endorsements into actionable momentum? Weeks of meticulous planning and strategizing crystallized into a singular focus, negotiating not just the terms of her proposal, but the stakes of her own leadership journey. In the days that followed, she immersed herself in countless meetings, adroitly navigating between assertiveness and flexibility. Each negotiation became a pivotal moment, a chance to refine not only her proposal but her role within the organization. Yet, shadowed by the duality of optimism and anxiety, self-doubt crept back. The executive's approval felt like a fragile facade. What if they were only appeasing her? The specter of skepticism loomed again, compelling her to question every aspect of her leadership skills. During her reflective evening walks, she battled the whispers of uncertainty that echoed louder with each step. Memories of mistakes from her past flashed through her mind, nudging her toward familiar pathways of self-doubt. To recalibrate her thoughts, Jessica sought refuge in a handwritten journal she had kept. Each entry became a cathartic release of fears intertwined with ambitions. One evening, she scribbled furiously, capturing the paradox she had been wrestling with. Am I competent because I lead, or do I lead out of pure desperation to prove myself? The very act of questioning became an ally rather than a foe, opening doors to insights that went beyond the surface. It was during one of her reflective sessions that Jessica had an epiphany. Rather than merely adapting to existing corporate frameworks, she envisioned an innovative culture within the organization. She would challenge traditional structures, fostering an environment where collaboration over competition could thrive. But to establish credibility in this vision, she knew she needed to demonstrate tangible outcomes. With renewed purpose, she prepared to present her vision of an agile, collaborative workplace model to the team. However, she also recognized a looming challenge, a vocal critic, Mark, whose resistance to change was as infamous as his acumen. He openly questioned her competencies, dismissing her ideas as idealistic. Their paths would soon converge in a way that could either sharpen her vision or fracture her resolve. As she formulated her strategy, she couldn't shake the feeling that confrontations were inevitable. Mark's presence had a way of magnifying every uncertainty, every doubt festering within her. Still, She steeled herself, crafting responses and counterarguments, rehearsing the narratives she would present to address both his critiques and concerns. In preparation for their meeting, Jessica gathered her research and insights, looking to anticipate the challenges she knew he would bring forth. This time, her honest assessment of her vulnerabilities became a shield rather than a vulnerability. Would she engage with confidence, or would the shadow of doubt hold her back? The stakes felt higher than ever. The day of the meeting arrived, and with it, a charged energy. As she entered the room and locked eyes with Mark, she could feel the pressure of his scrutiny. Would this confrontation validate her capabilities, or would it unravel the progress she had made? The tension coiled within her, ready to either explode or propel her forward. As she found her voice and began to articulate her vision, Jessica could feel the pivotal moment approaching. Thoughts swirled in her mind, an internal war between the fear of judgment and the thirst for genuine change. In that moment, everything would hinge on her ability to confront both Mark and her self-doubt head-on. Would she break free from the expectations of others, or would she slip back into the shadows of hesitance? The answer lay just out of reach, and Jessica was determined to grasp it. Jessica stood before her peers, the conference room buzzing with a cocktail of anticipation and skepticism. Mark's piercing gaze was fixed on her, a looming reminder of the challenges she'd faced. For so long, the shadow of doubt had dictated her story, but now she was determined to be the author. As she began her presentation, her heart raced, pulsing in time with her rhythm of speech. She strategically showcased the potential benefits of fostering a collaborative environment, framing it as a necessity in the fast-evolving market landscape. Knowing Mark's penchant for skepticism, she even highlighted case studies where competition had transformed into collaboration, resulting in increased innovation and revenue streams. Yet, as she spoke passionately about the power of teamwork, she could almost tangibly feel Mark's critical energy pushing back. Just as she anticipated, he interjected, "This sounds nice in theory, but how would you handle the inevitable conflicts that arise? Teamwork can easily devolve into chaos without a strong directive leadership." His words could have been a sharp knife cutting through her confidence, but instead, they ignited a flame of assertiveness. Jessica took a moment, absorbing his challenge. She responded thoughtfully, "Mark, conflict arises in any dynamic. It's our approach to conflict resolution that defines our success. My aim is to establish a culture that embraces conflict as a catalyst for growth. We can empower teams to resolve disagreements collaboratively, finding solutions that benefit the project instead of letting egos dictate outcomes." There was a noticeable shift in the room's energy as she spoke. Executives shifted in their seats, nodding subtly, as if they were beginning to see the merit in her vision. Jessica's voice grew steadier, more confident. It became clear that she was no longer the woman overshadowed by her past. She had transformed into a leader advocating not just for herself, but for a new way to conduct business. Despite the initial tension, she found her flow and connected with others in the room. She invited feedback, showing respect for their insights while remaining firm in her convictions. Her willingness to engage in dialogue, rather than dictate, transformed the atmosphere from confrontational to collaborative. By the time the meeting was nearing its end, Jessica felt an undeniable sense of empowerment. Mark posed further questions, but this time, they evolved into a dynamic exchange where they collaboratively re-envisioned aspects of her model. Rather than seeing him as an adversary, she perceived a valuable ally whose expertise could enhance her vision. As they concluded, Jessica realized that she had not only articulated a vision for a new workplace culture, she had effectively demonstrated her ability to stand firm against adversity. The room buzzed with murmurs of approval and interest, and as the executives filed out, many reached out with thoughts and insights, signaling the openness she had hoped to foster. Later that evening, she sat at her desk, reflecting on the day's events. The breakthrough felt monumental. No longer was she at the mercy of others' perceptions. She had conquered not just her insecurities, but had laid the groundwork for a legacy of transformational leadership. Her phone buzzed an email from the gray-haired executive congratulating her on an impactful presentation. A smile crept across her face, a deserved acknowledgement marking her establishment as a credible professional. Thrilled yet grounded, Jessica understood that her journey was just beginning. The growth she experienced crystallized into an unwavering belief in herself, her capabilities, and the future she envisioned. She envisioned not just a successful business, but a thriving community connected through trust and collaboration, where her legacy and that of the artisans she championed could flourish. Jessica concluded this chapter of her life drenched in satisfaction. She had transitioned from feeling like an outsider to establishing herself as a capable leader, recognized not just for her resilience but for the vision she brought to life. The road ahead remained uncharted, yet she approached it with solid confidence, for she had proven to herself that she could navigate any storm. In that moment of clarity, she realized her greatest achievements lay not only in the business she sought to build but in the courage to confront her past and the determination to carve her own future. This was the dawn of a new era in Jessica's life, one built not on the shadow of her history, but on the solid foundation of her achievements. Do you want to witness more incredible journeys of transformation just like Jessica's? You need to subscribe now to never miss the next exclusive emotional story. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a tremendous difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jessica's amazing journey. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need inspiration and the power of personal overcoming stories. This is the moment to show your support and be part of a community that celebrates success against all odds. Don't wait even one more second.